Okay, so in this video, obviously I'm going to show you how to transform some logos, whether it be a Nike or a Puma or whatever other sports, it doesn't matter. Just pick a brand, you can do this effect. But before we begin, just a little insight into what's going on in my world. The desk is a mess because, check this out, I'm actually making a custom keyboard. I'm telling everybody I know, friend, foe, none, priest, I don't care. I'm telling everybody that I'm making a keyboard, and I'll give updates about that. But either way, this seems random. Let's make the logo thing. So as you saw, we can control the color, the distribution, the rotation, and it can turn into any shape. Without further ado, let me just show you how to do that. It's actually quite simple, but the complexity, the effect looks so good. So in the scene, I'm just going to get rid of everything and I'm going to import in my logo. Now you could either do this or you could like model it. Like maybe your logo is like, I don't know, something like this, some boring ass logo. You can model it or you could import it in. In my case, I'm going to import in an SVG because most logos you can find online for free as a scalable vector graphic. That's what SVG is. It's a good thing it's scalable because it's so tiny. Look at that little Puma thing. So let's just scale that up and let's also center it. So I'm moving the origin to the center so that we know where to move it to the 3D cursor. You understand what I'm saying. Either way, we got the Puma logo. Make sure that if it's a curve object, which it is already, we convert that into a mesh and then we'll be good to go. So convert to mesh, and now you can see this is a thing with actual geometry. The rest of this is geometry nodes, and this is where it gets interesting. So if you think about it, if you want a bunch of points to kind of rotate and cluster and do this nebula thing and then turn into a logo, this is basically a matter of distributing a bunch of points on the surface, moving them far away, and then kind of calculating the reverse transformation. Here's how we're going to do it. So first of all, we need a bunch of points. I'm going to do this with a distribute points on faces. You're going to notice no matter how high I make this density, unless it gets very, very high, we only get a single point. Like, where are the points? This is because we took our SVG, our scalable vector graphic, and we scaled it up a bunch. Meaning if we look at this object, of course, the scale is huge. Of course, we're not going to have many points. So Control A, all transforms. That's just going to reset the scale to 1, and now our density works the way you expect. For now, pick a high number. We might make that bigger or smaller. And for each of these points, because right now we're seeing the points, but it's not actual geometry, I just want to put a little placeholder object. So that could be a cube or a sphere, or a trick I learned recently from a client is an icosphere. It's like a low geometry sphere. Let's take it, make it even smaller so I can start seeing gaps in between. There we go. Okay. So we have a bunch of points, and on each of those points, we have a little icosphere. Now the name of the game is how do we move the points, right? If I put a set position in between, we can move the points, and then the instances follow along. We could do some magic in the set position node to get the transformation. We're mainly going to be dealing with this offset. To do this, I'm going to use a noise texture instead of a random vector for each point, because I want them all to distribute, to scatter, but not in random directions. There should be some clustering and stuff. Noise texture does this. So if I click or send this through the offset, you can see it kind of distorts everything, but it kind of keeps it bundled together. In fact, you can see it's kind of shoving everything to the top right. We just need to fix that quickly. This is because it's adding some number between 0 and 1 on X, Y, Z. I've explained this a million times. So to center it, subtract half of that. And now this is centered. So before, after. It's just adding our distortion. Second order of business is I only want this to be on the X and Y plane because I'm just going to be putting the camera on top of it. So I'm just going to set this to 1, 1, 0, basically suppressing the Z coordinate. And then finally, I'm going to add a scale node. I know it's a lot, but the scale node is going to say how big should this effect be? And you can already see how we're going to get scattered points to form into a cohesive thing. We basically did it in reverse. Because doing it the other way would be insane. It's like we need gravity to tell it roughly where to go, right? It'd be insane. So we have this, and maybe let's have a procedural way to animate it so I don't need to keyframe it. So I'm going to open up my timeline. Let's say on frame 0, we want it to be scattered, and on frame 40, we want it to be like all together. How do we do that procedurally? Well, this number is, again, kind of controlling our distribution, our animation. So if I take this, connect a frame to it, so it's looking at the frame number, we could just do a bit of a remapping to get this to work. So this is a cool little trick if you haven't seen it. So use a map range node. we want to say from frame 0, or I guess from frame 1 is the first frame, to 40. Let's say it takes 40 frames. Go from, let's say, a distribution of 6 to 0. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Boom. So you can see exactly on frame 40, it finished the transformation. What are these numbers? Frame 1 and frame 40 are basically the range. So I'm saying for the input, take everything between frame 1 and 40, that's how long it's going to take, and map it from, well, it should start very distorted, so a big number, maybe even bigger, like 10. Go from 10 to 0, where 0 means no distortion. That's the idea here. We could do it even more cleverly. What if instead of all the points kind of just being there and it kind of looks like, oh, it's cool, it's cool, it's cool, and then it's over? What about we have some stragglers? I think that would be cool. So not all the points arrive at the same time. Well, to do this, all we need to do is say the time that determines the motion of the particles, have that be different for each particle, right? So I'm going to add, this time we can use a random value. So think of it as each point that we distributed gets a number between, let's say I'm making it negative so that some of them they're like 10 frames behind. That's what the negative means. So negative 15, let's say. Each of these is going to receive a delay, and then it's going to map through this function. So let's see what this looks like. So you can almost see that most of it's done, but now we have a couple stragglers. Let's make it even bigger, minus 25. It's zooming, and then we have the stragglers. This is what's going to make it look cool. By the way, one thing you might notice here, let me open this, is you're going to see the points that haven't been accumulated yet, that are straggling. How many times can I say that in a video? Straggling. The ones that are straggling behind, they're kind of frozen until they get picked up. This is because of this clamping, and long story short, the issue with this is that we're saying only start the animation once you get to frame 1, but some of them are 25 frames behind. So let's have it start at minus 25, I believe. Should make sense. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah. So now we still get the delay, but everything kind of starts off at the same time. It's just that some particles will take longer than others. Cool. Another thing we can do to make this random is right now they're just kind of zooming on a linear path to where they should be. Let's add some distortion to that path. In other words, rotation. Here's a cool little trick. This is what the freelance offer was about that I was doing. And you get to see the tutorial for free, isn't that cool? What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a vector rotate node to add a bit of twirl as they come in, almost like each point is spiraling about its center. So I'm going to take our transformation, we want to rotate it, and then whatever we do with this, let's just add our rotation. Such that you can see now when we play with the angle, whoa, not only does it look cool, but you're going to notice when it gets to 180 degrees, it goes to the design, which isn't by coincidence. I mean, to be honest, if I was to tell you why, I couldn't tell you why, but it's kind of a convenient fact about this. You could think about why that is the case. I think it has to do with the center and all this. If I shift it over, who's to say, really? Oh, that's cool. You could get a diagonal effect. Point is, this goes from 0 to 180. Meaning we could take advantage of this and also map this to the time. So we know that on frame 40, whenever we want to end, we want this to be at 180 degrees. Well, instead of going from 10 to 0, let's have it go from 1 to 0, so we have a nice number to work with. Of course, that means we need to multiply this by 10, because it's supposed to go from 10 to 0. But now we can add another multiplier that goes from 0 to 180. Or we multiply by 180. So again, it's going from 1 to 0. I'm scaling that by 10 for this one, and I'm scaling it by 180 degrees for this one. Now, you might think that's going to work, but look at this. Whoa, what's going on here? Too much. It turns out when you plug in an angle, even though this is taking an angle number, like a degrees, it accepts radians. I don't know if that's a glitch or not. So you want to set this to pi, because 180 degrees is pi radians. And now you can see we get the twirling and the stragglers and everything, I believe. Yeah. If you wanted to rotate counterclockwise, just make it a negative pi. It's kind of up to you. I think I like the look of clockwise more. And remember, the cool thing about this is it's all procedural in the sense that if I set this number to 80, it's going to take 80 frames. It's going to be much longer. But look at that. That's kind of cool. Huh? And also, since we're going from 1 to 0, we could do some kind of remapping using powers. So if I put this to a power of 2, it's going to kind of speed up at the very end. Or is it going to slow down? Let's try a 0.1. Yeah. So you could do kind of speed ramp effects with this. It's kind of up to you. That looked pretty cool in itself. But just so you know, that's something you can play with. Beyond that, let's make it look a tiny bit better. I'm thinking we shouldn't have these particles just out and about. And by the way, we can scale this up even more by like 15 or something. I don't want these particles just out and about. I want them to be invisible until they get closer and closer and closer. One way we can do that is with the scale. So we can say points that are very far from their final destination be tiny. That's a great movie, by the way. And otherwise, you know? I know I'm not making sense. I want to control the scale. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, connect it to the scale, which is going to give us the opposite of what we want. Everything is going to be of scale 1 with a bit of delay, and then they get invisible. Because again, we're going from 1 to 0. I just want to flip that, map range, take 1 to 0, make it 0 to 1. So that now you could see the points kind of get bigger as they are forming, which I think looks pretty cool. One final thing, I know I'm adding a lot of detail here, but this is what makes it really pop, is I want to multiply this by another random value, so that not all the points are the same size, because you can see they're all identical. Connect that here, and now some points are big, some points are small. It's going to make it dynamic. Let's make sure none of them are zeroed out. So there we go. That's the effect. If you don't want them to be completely scaled down in the beginning, what you could do is instead of 0 to 1, you make it like 0.2 to 1. And I should mention, you give this an emissive material. This isn't a tutorial about materials. It's just about how to make the effect. But I should mention, you know what, let's just set up a material so I can get to the final point, because I think it's super important. So I'm just going to make a material. That can be the standard material. And for this, I'm just going to make a emissive, nothing fancy here. So I'm saying all the points that are instanced, take this material, take it, and that material is going to be one of a emission set to orange or whatever. I mean, it's a puma, right? Am I thinking of a leopard? I feel like it should be orange. So we have this. I'm going to make it glow. I'm going to make it bloom. There we go. The point I wanted to make is when we render this, it's just going to look like a scatter of points, but there's something we can do to make it look a lot better. So you can see it kind of forms. It's looking laggy through the viewport. But let's just pick a frame. If we render this, it looks pretty cool. To take this to the next level, 100% enable motion blur with some divisions. Check this out. When we enable motion blur, we don't just get particles. It's going to take a second. Maybe I shouldn't have brought up the quality that much. Okay, so I was able to exit out of the render. Let's see if we can fix this. So what I wanted to say is take the steps. Let's make it a tinier number. Let's try even 1. Take the shutter, bring it up, I believe. The higher, the longer the streaks. And now when we render, let's try this out. Hopefully it doesn't take forever this time. I mean, it's not that many particles, Evie. You can handle this, my guy. I don't know why it's taking so long. It's probably because I'm doing the screen capture at the same time. There we go. You can see now we get these motion trails, and almost looks like embers forming the thing. Either way, enable motion blur. That was my point. And I think that's the end of the tutorial. So hopefully you guys learned something about logo, particle, I don't know. If you made it to the end of the tutorial, I just want to let you know I have a Patreon. There's a link in the description if you want to get the blend to this and other projects I've made in the past. If you want early access to tutorials, and if you want exclusive tutorials that I make every once in a while, Patreon is the place to do that. I want to thank all 750 some patrons. I know I'm in a mood right now. It's a good tutorial recording mood. What can I say? Check it out, okay? I'm not in the correct state of mind to talk about it. If you want to support this channel and CG Matter, that's the way to do it. Thanks for watching, guys. See ya.